The black son of a famous singer, was invited to sing at school as a joke, but his voice left the room speechless. "Hi, everyone. Let's see the diva's son embarrass himself." Blake's shrill laughter echoed through the auditorium as other teenagers looked at each other with malicious smiles. On stage, the spotlights created an island of cruel light, where Marcus Johnson, 16, waited alone, facing an audience of pale faces and mocking smiles. Westmore Academy was the kind of private school where rich teenagers flaunted powerful last names and even bigger egos. A place where students drove luxury cars and competed to see who could throw the next extravagant party. Marcus was the school's charity project, a black kid from Oakland who had won a full scholarship while his mother, Vivian Johnson, a soul music superstar, toured the world. "The microphone is on, Mr. Johnson." Principal Reynolds smiled with false warmth. "Since you insisted on participating in the talent show, we're all eager to see what you've prepared." The audience snickered. Everyone knew Marcus had never volunteered. Blake and his friends had forged his signature on the form as part of an elaborate humiliation. "Let's see if talent runs in the family," they had said in the hallways. Marcus had never sung in public. In fact, he made a point of hiding any association with his mother's career. Not out of shame, Vivian Johnson was a force of nature who had won 5 Grammys, but out of exhaustion from always being reduced to the son of Theophamus singer. Since arriving at Westmore 6 months ago, he had lived in the shadow of that label, even, as he killed himself, studying to prove his worth. It was strange how no one seemed to remember that his mother was black when they asked for selfies or concert tickets. But when they wanted to belittle him, suddenly the color of his skin became the perfect target for jokes disguised as friendly banter. "We're waiting, Marcus," insisted Principal Reynolds, drumming her fingers. "Or are you going to give up?" He could feel the weight of the stares. He could practically touch the expectation of failure that filled the air. At the back of the audience, he saw Blake and his friends with their cell phones, ready to capture his embarrassment and turn it into the next humiliating viral video. "I don't have anything prepared," Marcus said, his voice low but firm. "What a shame," the principal replied with a theatrical sigh. "Maybe next time. I think we can, but I can make something up," he finished. A sudden silence fell over the auditorium. From her seat in the front row, the music teacher, Mrs. Rivera, looked at him with an unreadable expression. Just a week earlier, she had found him alone in the music room after school, humming softly to himself as he read a history book. He hadn't known she was there until he heard the sound of sheet music falling to the floor. "You don't have to do this," Mrs. Rivera said now quietly. She was the only person at that school who really knew him. Marcus took a deep breath. There were 2 options. Walk off that stage, defeated, or show a part of himself he had always kept hidden. He closed his eyes for a moment, feeling something burn in his chest. Not just anger, but a quiet determination. He knew that feeling. "Actually, I'm going to sing something." "My mum wrote," he announced with a calmness that surprised even himself, "but she never recorded it or showed it to anyone." A murmur of surprise rippled through the auditorium. Even the cruelest were intrigued. An unreleased song by Vivian Johnson that was worth sharing. What no one at Westmore Academy knew was that before Vivian became famous, before the Grammys and sold-out concerts, she was just a single mother singing lullabies to her son in a small apartment in Oakland. Marcus had grown up not only listening to her voice, but learning from it. As he adjusted the microphone, his eyes met Blake's, who was still smiling mockingly. But there was something in Marcus' calm, determined gaze that made the bully's smile falter briefly. If this story of prejudice and public humiliation touched you in any way, be sure to subscribe to the channel to find out what happens when we underestimate someone based solely on prejudice, and how a moment created to destroy can become the catalyst for a turnaround that no one will ever forget. What are you waiting for, Johnson? Maybe you need your mommy to sing for you, Blake shouted, prompting another wave of laughter. Marcus closed his eyes. He took a deep breath. When he spoke, his voice was low, almost a whisper into the microphone. This song is called Invisible Roots. And then he sang. The first note came out shaky, but quickly found its footing. It was a soulful ballad with traces of jazz, the kind of song that demanded vocal control and emotional depth. Marcus's voice, contrary to everyone's expectations, was not only in tune. It was extraordinary, deep, andric, with a timbre that seemed impossible for someone his age. In the third row, Blake blinked in confusion. This wasn't in the script. The planned humiliation was turning into something completely different. Marcus sang about roots growing beneath the concrete, invisible but powerful. About carrying the history of his ancestors in his blood. About staying whole in a world that tries to tear you apart. Every word, every note seemed to strip away layers of a carefully constructed persona. In the front row, Mrs. Rivera watched with tear-airy eyes. She had witnessed something rare in that music room last week. Not just raw talent, but the discipline that only comes with years of dedicated practice. After the sheet music fell to the floor, she asked him why he hid that voice. "Because I don't want to be the kid singing his mom's songs," Marcus had replied, shrugging his shoulders. "And I don't want to be the diversity project who sings. I want to be respected for more than my last name or the color of my skin." Rivera knew exactly what he meant. As a Latina pianist who had left the stage to teach, she knew well the weight of labels and expectations. "But to deny your talent is to deny part of who you are," she said then. Now, as Marcus's voice filled the auditorium, Rivera realized that he had finally understood that lesson. Too late, she noticed Blake sneaking out the side of the auditorium, whispering with two friends, all of them wearing smirks. The song reached a brief interlude, and Marcus opened his eyes. Some students had stopped filming. Others looked genuinely impressed. Principal Reynolds frowned, clearly recalculating her opinion of the charity project. That's when the sabotage began. The stage lights began to flicker frantically. On the sound system, a high-pitched feedback cut through the air. Someone had broken into the technical booth. Marcus hesitated, missing a note, but didn't stop. When the sound returned, a heavy, jarring electronic beat was superimposed over his voice through the PA system. Blake's friends were clearly trying to turn his performance into a joke again. The audience looked confused at the stage. Some laughed, thinking the interference was part of the performance. Others began to whisper, realizing the sabotage. Principal Reynolds stood up to intervene, but before she could do so, something unexpected happened. Marcus adjusted his voice. Instead of fighting the intrusive electronic beat, he incorporated it, modifying the rhythm of the song and transforming the disturbance into music. Years of watching his mother improvise at rehearsals and concerts had taught him to turn accidents into opportunities. The expressions on Blake and his friends' faces changed from malicious satisfaction to disappointment. The audience, which seconds earlier had seemed ready to witness a disaster, now watched a true musical tour to force. The students, while we're still filming, began to sway to the music. Some raised their cell phones, with the flashlights on, as if at a real concert. The song now had a life of its own, greater than the intention to humiliate that had provoked it. When their song ended, the silence that followed lasted only 2 seconds before an explosion of applause. It wasn't polite or forced applause. It was genuine, spontaneous, surprised. A boy in the front row, Thomas, heir to a real estate fortune and normally a loyal ally of Blake's, was the first to stand up in a standing ovation. Others followed. Blake remained seated, his arms crossed, his face contorted into a bitter expression. His gaze said it all. This isn't over. Backstage, after the applause, Mrs. Rivera found Marcus trembling slightly, the adrenaline still coursing through his veins. "You knew they would try something like that, didn't you?" she asked quietly. Marcus nodded. "Blake had already mentioned preparing a surprise for my performance. That's why I chose that song. My mother wrote it so I could improvise and adapt it depending on the audience. And you knew it so well that you were able to get around the sabotage," Rivera added admiringly. "They completely underestimated you. They always underestimate me." Marcus replied with a half-smile. "Is that why you decided to perform, even though you knew about the trap? To prove a point?" Marcus hesitated. "Not exactly. Singing was never my plan. But last night, after I found out about the forged application, I got an email." He paused, as if deciding whether to continue. An email from Berklee College of Music in Boston, a scholarship program for exceptional talent. My mother sent them a recording of me singing without telling me. The teacher raised her eyebrows in surprise. "That's one of the best music schools in the country, and they want a live performance. An audition next week." Marcus ran his hand over his face. "Can you believe my own mother never told me she thought I was good enough?" Rivera held his shoulder gently. "Sometimes parents see potential we don't see in ourselves." The moment was interrupted by a group of students entering the dressing room, all wanting to talk to Marcus. Between compliments and questions about his mother, few noticed Blake standing in the doorway, his gaze cold and calculating. He was typing furiously on his cell phone. "Enjoy Themament," Blake whispered when he finally managed to get past Marcus. "I've made sure it will be brief." There was something in his voice, a disturbing confidence that made Marcus feel ill. Whatever Blake was planning was worse than flashing lights or interference in the sound system. That night, as he returned to his dorm room on campus, Marcus received a notification. Someone had posted a video of his performance on the school social media. It wasn't just the video, it was the comments below. The first from an anonymous account. Read, "Find out the truth about Marcus Johnson's talent and why his mother keeps him hidden from the public." Link in the comments. It was just the beginning. The next morning, Marcus' phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Notifications flooded, his screen, messages, comments, shares. The video Blake had posted wasn't just of the performance. It was a malicious montage that interspersed Marcus singing with old clips of Vivian Johnson, his mother, suggesting that he was just imitating her and had no talent of his own. The caption was devastating, exclusive. "Why does Div.A Vivian Johnson hide her son from the stage?" Sources confirmed that he was rejected by every record label for lack of originality. Sad. Fake talent. Charity project. Marcus felt his stomach sink. It wasn't the first time they had tried to put him down, but never so publicly and cruelly, ignoring my calls now. His mother's voice echoed when he finally answered. Vivian Johnson was many things. An international superstar, an incredibly busy single. Mother, but she was never one to tolerate injustice. I just saw that garbage you posted. I'm getting the first flight home. Mom, no, Marcus protested. That'll just make things worse. Blake will love to turn this into even more drama. There was a moment of silence on the line. You're right, Vivian finally said. That's your story to tell. But let me help you in other ways. In his dorm room, Marcus stared at the ceiling. Next to him, his roommate Eli, a quiet kid from Chicago with whom he barely exchanged words, surprisingly offered his help. My dad's a defamation lawyer, Eli said without looking up from his laptop, and I know a little about digital tracking. Marcus looked at him, puzzled. Since when do you care? Eli finally looked up. Since I heard you sing yesterday, and since I saw what they did afterward, some lines shouldn't be crossed. In the music room, Mrs. Rivera was also mounting her own offensive. As advisor to the student newspaper, she had privileged access. Look at this, she said, showing Marcus a folder of files on her computer. I've been recording all the student council meetings for the last 3 years for transcription. Guess who's always talking in the files? Blake's voice discussed openly how he was manipulating the disciplinary committee, grades, even previous cases of bullying against other scholarship students. It was an unwitting confession of a systematic pattern. This is Marcus hesitated. Pure gold, Rivera finished. We just need the right moment. The moment came sooner than they expected. Blake, drunk on the apparent success of his online attack, called a special meeting of the student council, of which he was president, to discuss artistic integrity issues in the talent show. He didn't know that Marcus had been tipped off by Thomas, the boy who had been the first to stand up and applaud. In the large auditorium, the student council gathered with the school's administration. Blake looked confident, impeccable in his custom blazer, while Principal Reynolds watched him with obvious admiration. We have evidence that certain participants have used inappropriate technical resources to artificially enhance their performances, Blake began, casting a calculated glance at Marcus. That's when the auditorium doors opened. It wasn't Vivian Johnson who entered as everyone, including Marcus, had expected. It was a middle-aged black man wearing a simple but elegant suit. Richard Torres, multiple Grammy Award-winning music producer and Marcus's godfather. I hope I'm not interrupting, Torres said in a voice that was accustomed to commanding recording studios. I was invited by Mrs. Rivera to discuss possibilities for a partnership with Westmore's music program. Blake blinked, confused. This wasn't the confrontation he had expected. Mr. Torres, Principal Reynolds, rose promptly, recognizing the renowned producer. What an unexpected honor. The honor is mine, Torres replied as he walked down the center aisle. Especially after watching this video that's been circulating. I was impressed by this young man's talent. The principal looked confused. Video. Rivera turned on the projector. The screen did not show the defamatory montage of Blake, but the original, unedited video of Marcus's performance, including the moment when the lights flashed and the electronic beat invaded the performance. As a producer who has worked with talent for over 20 years, Torres continued, I recognize raw talent when I see it. But what impressed me most was this. The image changed. It now showed Blake and his friends storming the technical booth, clearly visible, tampering with the equipment during Marcus's performance. Security cameras, Rivera explained softly to the stunned director, installed after last year's vandalism incident. Blake powled. That's taken out of context. And so is this? Torres asked, as the screen changed again. Now, it showed screenshots of Blake's messages planning not only the sabotage of the show, but also the smear campaign. "Let's take down the black kid before anyone finds out he's better Thanos," one of the messages read. The auditorium fell deathly, silent. "How did this?" Blake stammered, searching the principal's face for support. "Your friend Thomas felt he needed to clear his conscience," Marcus explained. Finally speaking, he handed everything over to Eli and Ms. Rivera last night. "Principal." Reynolds looked like she had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. "Blake, go to my office now." As Blake staggered out, defeated, Torres turned to Marcus with a smile. "So, you never told them, did you?" Marcus shook his head, a small smile forming. "Told them what?" asked Rivera. Torres smiled more broadly. "That besides being the godson of a producer, Marcus recorded an entire album in my studio last year. An album that's scheduled for release next month." Shock and understanding spread across everyone's faces. "It's true," Marcus confirmed calmly. "I didn't want anyone to know. I wanted to be judged on my own merits, not my mother's name or connections." But now, he glanced at the door through which Blake had left in disgrace. "Now, I think it's time for my music to be heard." And so what Blake had planned as a final humiliation turned into the public revelation of a talent that the whole world would soon know, no longer as Vivian Johnson's son, but as Marcus Johnson, an artist in his own right. By the end of that day, 2 videos were circulating on the internet. One of Marcus' incredible performance, and another of Blake being escorted off campus, his humiliation permanently recorded for millions of viewers. Sometimes the cruelest jokes end up having the most unexpected and just endings. The Westmore Academy campus looked different that Monday morning. Notices about a special assembly were posted on all the bulletin boards. On the school social media accounts, a formal statement announced changes to the code of conduct and anti-discrimination policies. In less than 72 hours, the scandal involving Blake had transformed the institution. Marcus arrived discreetly through the back, avoiding the curious glances and reporters crowding the main entrance. News of his impending album had leaked to the local press, attracting unexpected attention. "How does it feel to be the person who exposed decades of covert institutional racism?" Eli asked us. They walked together to their first class. Marcus adjusted his backpack like someone who just wanted to study in peace. In the principal's office, a tense meeting was underway. Principal Reynolds, now under investigation by the school board for negligence, stared nervously at the members of the disciplinary committee. "The Blake Hammond case is not an isolated incident," said a newly hired consultant, hired to manage the crisis. "Preliminary analysis of the recordings provided by EMS. Rivera reveals a systematic pattern of protecting certain students. Outside Westmore Academy, Blake's life was quickly falling apart. His early admission to Harvard was revoked. 3 light universities that had accepted him reconsidered their offers. His father, a prominent executive, faced uncomfortable questions from shareholders about family values and social responsibility. Blake was last seen leaving his parents' home with 2 suitcases bound for a military school in Arizona. His Instagram account, once filled with photos of yachts and exclusive parties, was deactivated after a flood of negative comments. Meanwhile, Richard Torres' studio was buzzing with activity. Marcus, sitting in a leather swivel chair, listened to the final mixes of his album Invisible Roots. "I always knew you had something special," Torres said, adjusting the equalizer. "But what happened at that school? It brought a depth to your performance that wasn't there before." Life experience, Marcus replied with a slight smile. His phone vibrated. It was a message from his mother, Vivian, who was finally returning from her world tour. Proud doesn't begin to describe how I feel. I'll be there tomorrow. I love you. She'd watched the original video of Marcus's performance over 100 times, she confessed later. I saw you turn their hatred into art, she said, when they finally met. That's what great artists do. The following month, Marcus's return to Westmore Academy was different. The hallways were no longer filled with muffled laughter or condescending glances. In their place was cautious respect, perhaps even admiration.